Now, most countries do not have a huge food supply problem, but it is concentrated in places where there's low water, low growing seasons, and low infrastructure to get the food to the people who need it. When we look at how much dietary output per country, we see the United States puts out over 3,500 calories per person in its food supply. And over here, they produce less than 1,900. That's how much is available. Right? It is getting better in many countries. See the calories available going up here, going up somewhat here, going up a lot in the Far East, and the world averages have gone up. For us, we've gone down. Let's talk a minute about food preservation because this is very important. Spoilage claims about 50% of crops and foods in some areas of the world. It breaks your heart when you see food rotting and people starving. People have used a variety of methods to preserve foods over the millenniums. Heavily salting foods, storing them in sugar. We don't see this a lot. Perhaps ham is where we see this a lot. Concentrated sugar syrups. Um, um, you can see this in like California rolls where they sugar the fish and the rice in raw fish. They'll put it in rice soaked in sugar to preserve it. Pasteurization. That came about because the King of France wanted to stop the spoilage of wine. So Louis Pasteur found that he could use slight heat, not even a lot, up to like 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and then quickly cool it. And it would preserve wine, milk. They do it to beer too. If you ever had Coors beer, they do not pasteurize it. And if you let it sit outside, it turns into this black, harmful stuff. Today we will use antioxidants. Antioxidants stop the food from spoiling, from the cells in the food from breaking down. Two of the most popular ones are BHT and BHA. They will scavenge free radicals, which are molecules with an unpaired electron. And as you know, electrons love to be paired, so what will happen is they will damage nearby molecules in order to steal their electrons. These are created all the time in our bodies, and usually the body destroys them themselves. The problem is that if it goes unchecked, it does age cells, and in extreme cases, it can lead to the propagation of cancerous cells. Now, for 50 years, they've irradiated food to kill microorganisms, little tiny um, uh, bacteria and other organisms. And it has never really taken off in this country. We're very afraid that radioactive remnants will remain in the food. They do, but very small, tiny amounts. Nothing that has ever been shown to harm people. You also have to understand when you cook food, you change its chemistry, and you can leave harmful chemicals on the food. For example, when you barbecue food, you put a huge amount of carcinogenic material on the surface of the skin by those high temperatures. But obviously, it's I don't mean to belittle it, but it's something that we're used to, and we really don't curtail our grilling, even though it can be very harmful. And as I say, for 50 years they've been checking on whether any of this kind of irradiation has any harmful effects, and no toxic effects have ever been found. They also quickly turn into stable products in the food, so they don't remain. But very few foods are proof for radiation in the U.S. Potatoes, strawberries, some fish and shrimp, and grapefruit for export. It is much more commonly known in Europe, Mexico, and Canada. And foods tend to be more expensive there, so you really don't want to lose them to spoilage. Now, think about agriculture in the U.S. We are extremely efficient. In 1900, an acre yielded 30 bushels. Today, it yields 130 bushels. This increase in efficiency has meant a significant drop in the number of people needed to farm. 33 million back then, today only 2 million. Many of the farming methods used to obtain these high yields have significant disadvantages, though. Extensive use of pesticides and fertilizers, and these pose certain risks. Pesticides, of course, are toxic. That's why they kill little insects. And people are worried about agricultural workers being poisoned and pesticides remaining on the food as they shipped out. Fertilizers do help plants grow, but major portions of applied fertilizers are washed away into streams and lakes. They upset ecosystems. They grow algae. If you've ever looked at the bottom of the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico, you see these large plumes of dead zone where there's so much algae, they've removed all the oxygen from the water. And they're getting bigger and bigger. They happen in the summer, especially where the temperatures are warm enough and the sun is strong enough to further promote the growth of this algae. As they run out, can also contaminate drinking water supplies and affect human health. When we have a long dry spell in the summer, then all of a sudden it rains, it really washes this stuff off into the water, and you see a lot of nitrate warnings because babies can have a bad effect that impedes their ability to absorb oxygen, resulting in blue baby syndrome. Now, a growing area is called organic. Organic food refers to the method of farming, right? Selectivity of genetic strains for climate and soil. That means they are more prone to grow in specific climate and soil areas. Greater attention for growing conditions, water and soil pH, so you've got to pay attention to how much you're watering and whether you have the correct acidity or alkalinity in the soil. You rotate the crops for pest control. This is a very old idea that they've gotten away from because you could drop a lot of pesticides on them. And it is harder to do, to be honest with you. But please don't think that the farmers are just willy-nilly throwing stuff on their fields. These things, for one thing, they want to take care of their property so that they can grow material in following years. Plus, pesticides and fertilizers cost tremendous amounts of money. Okay, they'll use composting instead of synthetic fertilizers or sewage sludge. Yum yum. Chemically, the molecules that plants absorb from the fertilizers are the same as the natural. Pesticides are additional. Organic seems to be it tends to be more benevolent to the environment and uses about 40% as much energy. Organic is cheaper to produce, but market forces often result in higher supermarket costs. You don't transport it as far, too. Organic food sales represent about 2% of U.S. food sales. There is very little on the books now, legislative-wise, to help the organic farmer. It is a huge bureaucracy, and it is a area that we're going to see a lot of changes in the future as people begin to demand more and more from their I guess from their food source. Last but not least, let's talk about chemical flavorings and colorings. This is another area where people are a little bit nervous about what is in their food. This is not necessary for nutrition nor for um, um, our bodies to get energy, but it helps us. We are used to intense flavors. We're used to intense colors. We also want to have a long shelf life, and all this comes out to the chemist's bench. For example, butyl betanoate tastes more like pineapple than real pineapple does to us. And we have strawberry flavorings that contain 48 ingredients to give us what we think strawberries should taste like. We also like bright red uh, fruit chewies. So we will put in red dye that comes from Peruvian insects, which are grilled, crushed, and used from everything from lipstick to ice cream. Natural does not always mean gentle.